By 24, I built a net worth of $100,000. A few months later, I quadrupled it to $400,000. But before I tell you how I did this, I need to tell you a story that I never told anyone before. I didn't grow up with money. My parents immigrated from China to the US with just a couple dollars and some clothes. I tell you this because what they went through shaped my childhood. I grew up witnessing all the little things that they did to save money. I remember how we would get these coupons in the mail and my mom would cut them out one by one. How instead of Nikes and Jordans, we got brandless shoes from Payless. And how we intentionally bought clothes that were way too big for me because I would still be able to wear them when I got older. And honestly, at the time, my ignorant thought it was the stupidest and most embarrassing thing ever. Imagine for a second going into a classroom filled with kids who had American Eagle branded t-shirts. American Eagle was cool at the time. And there I was, awkwardly standing in the corner with clothes that didn't even fit, which became my biggest insecurity at the time. Despite how I felt, I just had to accept it because I couldn't do anything about it. Until 2009. I was 14 or 15 in high school and I was still very obviously a hot mess. There was one night that I will never forget that completely changed the course of my life. A few friends and I were in a classroom after school, playing around. We were doing some silly freestyle rap disses like yo mama jokes and whatnot, basically making fun of each other. And I remember someone said this one diss that really stung. He made a joke about my biggest insecurity. And honestly, it hurt. I went home that night embarrassed and helpless. I couldn't ask my parents for new clothes because we didn't have the money. That night, I made a promise to myself that one day I will be rich and I will buy everything I ever wanted. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day. And at that time, I had no concept of wealth. I thought $100,000 was filthy rich. And so I made that my goal. And that very night, I started plotting and strategizing ways to make money. And that, ladies and gents, is probably the very first time you heard how a yo mama joke changed someone's life. In 2011, I started a clothing business, which to this day, I cannot believe people actually bought from because it looks like a blind 6-year-old designed them in Microsoft Word. Then I reinvested all the profits I made into buying and flipping phones, computers, and tablets online. Basically anything I could get my greedy paws on. Next, I started applying to literally every opportunity on the internet. Jobs, internships, the whole shebang, praying that something would stick and that I can make more money. And actually what's really funny is that my apply to jobs outside the US, as if I was gonna fly my teenage self to another country to work at McDonald's. After receiving 57 million rejections, and just as I was about to cry myself to sleep for the 22nd night in a row, I received this. And it didn't feel like real life. It felt like a coming-of-age Hallmark movie. An awkward, nerdy high school kid with no friends and no connections got an internship at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And I don't know if you can feel my excitement through the screen right now, but this was an absolutely huge moment for me. This was my very first exposure to people who actually worked white-collar jobs in the office, people who actually had money. I still remember one day in the office, a bunch of us were just chatting and someone casually mentioned that the guy that I was shadowing at work made $250,000 a year. And then I just started geeking out and I felt like I was sitting next to Bill Gates the entire time. But you know me, I played it cool, I kept it casual, no big deal. But then one day, I just straight up went up to him and I just asked him, "What's your secret to success?" Because I wanted that so badly. And he told me, be a sponge and absorb as much as you can from who you want to be. And I will never forget what he said. One, because I immediately thought of SpongeBob, and two, I took his advice to heart, especially in college when everything changed. Near the end of high school, I saved about $15,000. And despite all the lavishness that I promised myself, I didn't buy any of it. It didn't feel right to buy nice stuff for myself when I saw how much my parents sacrificed for me. So I decided to save for college because Lord knows my parents wouldn't be able to afford it. And then literally the most unexpected thing happened. Remember when I said I applied to a bunch of different opportunities? Well, some of them were college scholarships. I honestly wasn't expecting anything out of it, but after countless interviews, I was blessed enough to be awarded a full scholarship to Vanderbilt University. Life was finally starting to look up. When I told my parents the news that night, they couldn't have been more proud. And I was really proud of myself because it meant that all the sacrifices that they made were finally worth it. And I still remember this really cute phrase that my mom said that she heard from a Korean drama, "Aza Aza fighting," which meant keep going, keep fighting. In 2013, I went to college and I made it my goal to absorb everything I could from people I wanted to become. So I applied to a bunch of different summer internships. And at the same time, I worked at the library for minimum wage, started a photography gig, worked on several social media brands, just anything I could do to make money to keep the $100,000 promise that I made to my younger self. My most ambitious project yet was creating my app that was inspired by Yik Yak. After tirelessly working on it for months, I brought it to the local entrepreneurship center for feedback. And what one of the advisors said to me absolutely crushed me. He essentially said that this was the stupidest thing he had ever seen. And all I remember was I was speechless. It was also around this time that job applications finally got back to me. Rejection, rejection, rejection. And my grades were tanking because I was so focused on hustling that I didn't have time to study. At this point, saying that I was discouraged would be an understatement. My entrepreneurial drive was completely extinguished. I stopped everything I was doing and just focused on school. Then one day, I received an email. An executive from a local startup finally got back to me. He wasn't looking for an intern at the time, but he was happy to chat. But honestly, the timing was just really bad. I had an exam in a few days that I absolutely needed to pass. So I spent some time going back and forth thinking about it, and then finally, I wrote back. And in retrospect, I'm really glad I did, because the advice that he gave me was absolutely invaluable. During the meeting, I told him about all my rejections and exactly what I've been going through, and I'll never forget what he said to me. It doesn't matter if you fail 100 times or 1,000 times. All it takes is one success to forget all about your past failures. Near the end of college, I saved about $55,000. In 2017-2018, I started my full-time job in finance, and it took me until August 2019 to hit my $100,000 milestone. When I first saw that six-figure number, I felt such a rush of emotion. I flashed back to that night when it all started from just a yo mama joke. It's weird, but I like to think that younger Vincent would be happy and proud to see what he's finally become after hustling for so many years. But that's not where this story ends. Within a few months of hitting $100,000, I quadrupled it to $400,000. And I was only able to do this because of the 3 changes that I made after college. Ironically, the biggest mistake I made was setting the $100,000 goal when I was younger. Because by establishing this arbitrary number, I created a mental upper limit for myself. People are naturally inclined to stay in their comfort zones because anything beyond comfort is unknown and uncomfortable, so we tend to avoid it. And so when I initially set my mind to make $100,000, I unconsciously limited myself to only see $100,000 opportunities. But now that I've expanded my goals to be even bigger and even more aspirational, it's like I put on a new pair of eyeballs that allows me to see the path forward to bigger and better opportunities. And sure, I still get doubt and fear about setting such large goals, but I realize that my mind is just kind of a muscle that I need to train and strengthen over time. I'm forcing myself to think larger than what I ever thought was possible and to get comfortable with the unknown. But before I could successfully do this, I needed something else. Since the day we were born, our parents, school, society, and media conditioned us to fear and distance ourselves from failure because it's not good. But the person who never fails is the person who never attempts anything new. And after speaking with so many successful entrepreneurs, I realized that they all share the same feeling when it comes to failure. They welcome it because they understand the more you fail, the more you learn. I realized that you can't discover new stuff or develop new skills without failing. And I need to emphasize this because it's so important. Even if you lose all your money tomorrow, the one thing you will still have are your skills. Think of all the skills you developed as a floor. Your potential capabilities can't go any lower than that floor. It can only go higher when you learn new skills or you enhance existing ones. And since you are paid based on your capabilities, even if you lose all your money tomorrow, you will still have the capability to make that money back. Even though some of my side hustles failed terribly, I always learned something from them that I still use to this day. The easiest way to set goals outside your comfort zone is to get comfortable with failure. But the only way to get comfortable with that is by understanding this. Most people don't feel like they have control over their own future. As kids, our parents basically set up our entire lives. As adults, stuff like our income feels arbitrary and dependent on our bosses. So over time, the idea of getting rich, it feels like it's based on pure luck, something that's completely out of our control. But my childhood was different. I felt in control even when I was just a kid. Since my parents didn't speak English, I had to help them navigate. From translating really important documents, even to ordering McDonald's. And neither of my parents went to college, so I had to figure out the entire college and job application process on my own. When people don't feel like they're in control, they create these mental obstacles. Like, because I come from a poor family, it's extremely hard to get rich. Or because someone else came from a really wealthy family, they have it so much easier. And while all those things are true, believe me, I had countless moments when I felt helpless because of this. The harsh reality is this: if you do nothing, nothing will change. Those obstacles will still be there and you will still suffer. But someone in your family has to step up to face those obstacles and break the chain of poverty. So why can't that someone be you? But before you can successfully break this chain, you need to check out this video and learn these 6 reasons why you're broke. And it was only after learning this did I make my first $1 million.